After Zoomies at the dog park, it's time for Drive Up at Target. In goes a big bag of kibble and one squeaky chicken toy for the good boy. Drive Up that's ready when you are, only in the Target app. Just tap Target.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Sports are all about teamwork, and so is insurance. Whether you need an in-person or digital assist, State Farm is there to help you choose the right coverage for your home, car, and more. Get a game plan that helps fit your life and talk to State Farm today. State Farm with the assist. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability and eligibility vary by state.
Edition of the Terry's Talkin podcast. We're taping this late on Wednesday afternoon. I'm David Campbell, your host. Terry Pluto is here, fresh from OTAs out in Berea. Terry, how you doing?
Good. I always like that called organized team activities as opposed to what? Disorganized team activities or whatever.
That was last year's Browns. They were the DOT.
Oh, yes, right, yeah.
This was OTAs. So you picked the hot one to get out there. But
or dumb team activities. But it looked like basically most of these that I've seen. It's kind of touch football. It's hard to judge most things because nobody's hitting anybody. And it really, the things that I could see, kind of see how the quarterbacks are throwing the ball. You could see receivers. You could see guys defending passes. I don't know. You've been out there. Anything else that you could really see?
Oh, I don't know. You watch technique and you see how fast guys are compared to others. So yeah, let's start with the Browns here, Terry. And then we have some other good stuff to get into. We get some really good Cavs emails as people continue to try and build the roster. And I know you want to talk about the Guardians and some things you're thinking about that. But so today it was OTAs. All the quarterbacks were there. It's the first time you've kind of seen the four of them throw. But did you come away with any impressions of? I don't know, how did Dylan Gabriel look and how did Shedeur Sanders look? Did Flacco look like Flacco? Give us a rundown of all four guys, maybe real quick.
Well, first of all, Joe Flacco is made for this right there, this kind of touch football where, you could just look at the field and fire it. And he could really do that. I mean, he is so comfortable. Are they having touch football in the Olympics or something? Somebody
Flag football, yeah.
Yeah, he ought to be the quarterback. I mean, he really should. And I don't mean to knock it. It's just like, first of all, he's bigger than the other guys. He just, you could tell this is, I always think people say, well, it's not my first rodeo. This is not like, I mean, he was like there when they invented the rodeo and he's still riding the Bronco Bull and it's no problem for him. And I just thought, Joe looked like he looked a couple of years ago now. That doesn't mean it'll be that way when they're tackling people, but in terms of arm strength and all that, it's all there, poise. So he was that. Kenny Pickett was sort of nondescript. He didn't get a ton. They kind of divided the snaps up a lot, and I wish I could tell you something more. It's like he made like one really bad throw. There was an interception, and a couple of decent throws, but it was like, oh, ho hum. There again, this is one day, whatever. And the problem when all of us in the media are talking about this, even Mary Kay and Dan Lobby and Ashley, who are out there all the time, is they're only out there one day a week. So that's what you see. Now, like, for example, I had a couple of media people there that I trust have seen them all, and they were telling me how Dylan Gabriel looked really good. He did not look good when I was there. He seemed to I don't know, just he made some nice throws on these short crossing patterns, but some of the times you just kind of looked a little confused, just a little off with the timing. But I mean, they're throwing to some guys. I'm looking at the roster. I don't know who these people are, and I don't know what patterns they were supposed to run. But it is kind of shocking when you see Dylan Gabriel physically standing even next to Shedeur Sanders and certainly next to Flacco, and going, the guy's small. He just is. So we'll wait to see. Now, people are going to hear this and they're going to get all excited and they're going to want him to start. So who's left? Who haven't not talked about?
Shedeur Sanders.
Right. He had a good day. He really did. I mean, there was one time he went to kind of do a handoff and he fell down, and another time where I thought, he did his, which I hate, his drop back to pass. Here comes the rush. So let's just drop back 20 yards.
The backpedaling, yeah.
Yeah, backpedaling and they get in trouble. Okay, those are the two negatives. Positives, I thought he saw the field pretty well. He looked like his passes were pretty accurate. He seemed to be understanding what was going on, and he looked better than I thought. And the nice but, please, all right, can we do common sense?
Please, I'm all for that.
I'm holding the Browns schedule. They open versus. Do you remember who they opened versus?
For the regular season?
Yes, the games that count.
The Bengals.
The Bengals, yes.
Right.
Week number 2, they go where?
Baltimore.
You got it. Week number 3, I had to look this one up. Green Bay.
The Green Bay
comes here. But then again, week number 4, they go to?
They have Detroit. I remember that one.
Detroit. Game number 5 in London.
That's the Minnesota game.
Game number 6.
They come back and go to Pittsburgh, right?
Why would you play Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel or any other rookie, unless the whole franchise, in those games? I'm very serious.
No,
why would you do this?
Well,
I think no sense. Stop.
We talked.
People,
yeah.
Stop.
Yes. And we talked about this about a month ago. I think it might have been Jimmy Watkins's column, but he was writing about how every successful rookie quarterback sat for at least half a season and didn't play. So, like, neither of these rookies should be playing once the regular season starts. If you are trusting the data, which the Browns purport to do, right? Neither of these rookies should be playing until the second half of the season. That's just the way it should be.
Right, and it's ridiculous to put them in those games. And I don't. Well, we got to find out about the quarterbacks. You know what you could? Here is also the problem with that. Let's just say you start Gabriel just for whatever. So Gabriel comes out, and after 3 games, he's terrible. Gee, I wonder why that would happen. He played Cincinnati, he played Baltimore, and he played Green Bay. And if he manages to survive that, then he gets to play in the Dome in Detroit. You will know it won't be noisy there. So and now he's bad. So you know what you say? He can't play. He's too small. He's a mistake. Forget him. See how easy it is to write these people off early in the year.
Not only the tough road games, but totally upending a team's routine with the trip to England and the whole bit. It's just
right. If he manages to get to the next, right. But even the first month, and then so you drop him down, and suddenly you act like he's, worse than is another Deshaun Kaiser or something. I mean, please. And the same thing with Shedeur. Shedeur, looking at him, physically, and he has a chance to be an NFL quarterback, and probably has a chance at some point to start. But why do we want to, put him out in that situation? The nice thing, and I know they don't want to keep 4 quarterbacks, you hear that, but having Flacco and having Pickett, either one of those guys, especially we know with Joe could go out there and take a beating and handle it. And that may be what it takes. And if Joe's out there and he's hot and they're winning some games, fine. Okay, great. And meanwhile, the kids can learn. And here's what I love. There was not one mention of Deshaun Watson the entire day.
Or should there be?
Or should there be? Right. In other words, that which has hung over the franchise for 3+ years is gone. And they could pick whatever quarterback they want based on what I would say objective criteria, or at least their own honest football opinion, as opposed to trying to justify a contract, a trade, etc. And they have guys to pick from. But I was pleasantly surprised by Shedeur. I was a little disappointed in Pickett. I was hoping something would jump out. Not that he was terrible. It was just, as I mentioned, it was just kind of like, oh, ho, hum. And by the way, we're talking like maybe 12 to 15 throws. You see these guys, in these different red zone things and that. And Joe looked like Joe. And Gabriel, I thought, had kind of a tough time. Whereas people there told me in other ones he looked really good. I was kind of fired up to see him, but it was just, and I'm sure it's just like some days that you're just off a little bit. It seemed like when he would go to throw a down and out pass, and it would just be just off the fingertips, just a little bit off. So, but I came out of there fairly encouraged that, look, you got some guys. This is not, who was it? Cody Kessler and I forgot who the heck that quarterback room was with. Was that with Kaiser and
yeah,
the guy they had from Kansas City? It's just, where you had a quarterback room where nobody had ever won an NFL game.
Yeah, Browns fans are still trying to forget that quarterback room.
Right.
So yeah, your point about like common sense is so right on, because like you said, the media's out there one day a week, and next week we'll be out there 3 days, right? It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for minicamp, but there's so much to happen between now and the start of the season in terms of who's going to start, what the pecking order is. There's the practices in Philadelphia that they're going to have, and the lead up to the preseason games. There's months to go here. So like the people who are making graphics of what happens on a Wednesday at OTAs, and like, oh, here's the comparison. Like, let's just stop and like chill out and let things happen, right? I think that's basically what we're saying.
If you want to do it, that's fine, but it's almost irrelevant. When it comes to Sanders, there's like, based on my emails, what I hear, there's two camps. One is get him in there right away because the hype around Shedeur, and the other is get him out of here. He's a sideshow. He doesn't belong here at all. And how about if it's in the middle? He's a younger quarterback that needs to sit and needs to learn. And he may end up being okay. I mean, physically, if you looked at him and his name was Jones, you would think, oh, he's an interesting prospect.
And leave it there. Let him play some football, right?
Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that, we were talking about the 3 preseason games they have. I mean, those kids are going to play in those games. And we'll get to see them. We'll get to see, does Gabriel's size cause a problem in those games? Does Shedeur's tendency to kind of get happy feet and take off the wrong way with the rush, does that cause a problem? Can they deliver some stuff under pressure? All that will be seen. Interestingly, they were using some stuff with the Sampson kid, the running back from Tennessee. They were splitting him out, so it looked like they were trying to see how he would look in the slot. And they also were throwing several passes to Quinton Junkins, who, by the way, looked very comfortable catching the ball and running it. And that's about all I can tell you.
That's good. So there were interviews today, too, and I know that Jim Schwartz spoke today. There were a couple things I want to ask you about, Terry. What did he have to say about Mason Graham, the number 5 overall pick out of Michigan, defensive lineman? And then we can talk about what he said about Myles Garrett next. What about Mason Graham?
He has meat on the bone. That's what he said.
I like that.
Well, in other words, there's a lot more to develop and to pick from. He mentioned that he really obviously wants to see him against people where they're tackling and hitting. But he thought that his scheme would help Graham more than Michigan's team, where he was kind of occupying blockers. He said something interesting. He said, we always talk about defensive ends, being your pass rushers. He said, but if you think about it, who's the closest to a quarterback when he drops back to throw? Assuming he stays in the pocket, it's a defensive tackle. And so he said that he basically, there was asked about Myles, and he said, with great power comes great responsibility. He said he thought Myles would respond with his best season ever with the contract and all that. He said, he went through a lot. He got the deal. He's back. I'm not real worried about him. I know he'll be in shape. He'll be here when he needs to be here. And I don't think he was blowing smoke on that at all. I think that's exactly what he thought.
So I'm interested in that phrase, Terry. Yeah. What do you think he meant when he said, with great power comes great responsibility? And of course, that's the line from the Spider-Man movie. But for Myles Garrett, what does he mean that he wants to see Myles take on great responsibility?
I don't think he means so much leadership. At this point, Myles' personality is not going to change a whole lot. This is what you got. But that Myles could have, another huge – he thinks that Myles is set to have his best year, that between kind of where he is age-wise versus experience in the NFL, and probably maybe some plans that he has for Miles. He thinks he could really let loose and go. I really believe that. I don't think it's there. And he also said that the great players like Miles tend to respond to that type of thing.
The higher scrutiny of the contract and the expectation. So that's interesting. So you didn't think there was anything in that quote to suggest that Miles change what he does and try and be more of a leader on the team and
I'm
more
sure
rah-rah. It was more like you've got to produce more than ever because of this, right? That was kind of what he was saying.
Exactly it. Get back to defensive
right.
player of the year, that kind of stuff. I think Schwartz is not, Myles Garrett is not going to turn around and turn into, say, Donovan Mitchell, for that. Mitchell's the leader, Mitchell's the star, the leader, the spokesman for the franchise. Mitchell's very careful in what he says, and he's, Donovan is that's not Miles, and he doesn't particularly need to be. He talked about the need to do two things. We got to get off the field more on third down. We were number one in that last in 23. That fell way down. And he says, we have all these tapes of like Denzel and other people getting their hands on balls. He goes, we got to catch them.
Yeah.
Because the interceptions actually were there.
Too many pass breakups, not enough interceptions. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was about it. But there's meat on the bone for Mason Graham. That's the.
All right, there we go. All right. So we got an interesting email from Bob, listener, who writes in. He says, "Greetings. I love the in-depth knowledge shared regarding the 5 quarterbacks on the roster. However, there's one story that appears to be underreported, a story about why Kenny Pickett was sent from Pittsburgh to Philly. While his play in a bad Matt Canada offense was part of it, there's a single most contributing reason was Pickett's refusal to dress as the number 3 quarterback for a game after returning from injury. It was this refusal to dress for a game that soured his teammates and coaches. Pickett ultimately asked to be traded, and Pittsburgh accommodated. So as we report on the QB personalities and leadership and pre-draft behavior, let's also look into the entire QB room, especially of the leader in the clubhouse to start the season." So thanks for that, Bob. Bob sent this in before the draft, and I've kind of been saving it. But so basically, when he was in Pittsburgh, he had a high ankle sprain, right, Terry, was the story, and he did not dress. What else happened here? Let's parse this out.
He said he was not medically cleared to play, and so he didn't play. I really believe, he wanted to be traded, but that came after they signed Russell Wilson. And I think he saw Russell Wilson in this, and that it's time to get out of there. He went to Philadelphia and sat as a backup quarterback, got good reviews for how he handled it. I don't think Kenny Pickett's a big head case or anything of that sort.
Yeah, and coming off the injury, like there was like a back and forth between him and a reporter, or the reporter didn't have anything sourced, basically saying he wouldn't play, but I'm stand by my story. And Pickett's like, I was injured, I wasn't cleared to play, and it just kind of went away. But like to the Browns, like this, and the players on the Browns, like this is ancient history, right? Like it might as well have been 20 years ago to them.
Right. If there had been reports out of Philly that he didn't work hard or he didn't do his homework and he wasn't, prepared, etc., that's different. But what they traded DTR and a 5th-round pick for him.
Yep.
I mean, he's got one year left on his contract. If he acts up, he's out of there. They got 4 quarterbacks. One thing, Joe Flacco ain't acting up. He'll just wait his turn or take his turn when it's there right away. So I think that's how they do it. I mean, a lot of times, GMs, not just Andrew Berry, they kind of doubled back to guys they liked originally. Berry took 2 years to trade for Jerry Jeudy. And remember, it was like at that point he was considered sort of a disappointment in Denver and maybe even a bit of a head case because he, wasn't happy not getting the ball or whatnot. Well, he came here and excelled. Well, Pickett is another guy that Berry's talked about. He liked him in the draft and that. Dan Lobby said he mentioned being at the Senior Bowl, Dan, our colleague, and he said he's watching. This is when Pickett was a rookie. He's watching them run some plays where Pickett's taking snaps under center and doing some play fakes and throwing the ball downfield, looking good. And he said, I'm thinking there, but boy, I bet Kevin Stefanski loves this, watching it because Stefanski was there. Now, maybe he did. And, granted, that was whenever he came out, 22 or whatever year it was, but they were already deep in the Watson weeds. But that's Dan mentioned that to me today, and I thought that's interesting. So
Seeing
I'm just
that,
not
making
worried
that
about
connection. Yeah, it all comes
Yeah, I'm
around.
not worried about that. I just think that sometimes things can go haywire, and it had the big thing was how he was in Philadelphia, and maybe he didn't handle that well, Pickett. But also, I also know that young men do mature.
We have seen that many, many times over the years in Cleveland sports, haven't we? So
yeah, including in my own life, I can tell you that. Some of
me
the
too.
stuff I did at 25, it's like, oh, why did I say
I
that?
am right
Why
there
did
with you. All right. Hey, we should mention real quick, really excited about this news. Mary Kay Cabot, our colleague, has received a prestigious award from the Pro Football Writers Association, the Bill Nunn Award, which is basically the top award that organization gives out. And Mary Kay is going to be honored as part of the Hall of Fame ceremonies this summer down in Canton, including at the Enshrinees dinner. It's just a tremendous award. She is the second Cleveland football writer to ever win that award, and the first one was Chuck Heaton, and that is some pretty amazing company. Yeah. So congratulations, Mary Kay. We're just really excited about all of it.
I was talking to Mary Kay, and I am going to do a column on her as it gets a little closer, and she was saying that she works real hard, as she called it, to create content, stories, podcasts, and that. And I said, Mary Kay, the thing that amazes me is you don't get bored with this stuff. I mean, the Browns really are football's version of Groundhog Day. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have a quarterback. They got 7 quarterbacks. No, they don't have a quarterback. They haven't put together not 2 playoff seasons in a row. They've not put together 2 winning seasons. This is not a high bar in a row since the days of Bernie. I mean, this is like ridiculous. And she's been knocking her brains out covering this stuff. And she does it, with a lot of connections with agents, the financial stuff. I admire that because, I did, frankly, unlike a lot of columnists who sort of fall into that early on and they're kind of anointed as special ones when they're younger. I did 13 years of beat work, 14 if you count 1 year of AA baseball, 6 years of Major League Baseball, 7 years of the NBA. And so I know how hard beats are. And now I didn't have pro football, but I had the other two. And boy, some of those seasons when it's bad, it almost is like being in a bad marriage or something. You're just stuck there. Yeah. And for her, how was it 30 years or how long has she been doing this?
Yeah, I'd have to look that up.
It goes back to Belichick. So
yeah, it's been a while.
So that's like 92. And so it's like 30 some years.
Yeah.
And the freshness she brings, that's one of the most things that are admirable to me. And along with, just the fact that she's good at what she does. I mean, our staff, and then you turn around, you look at Paul Hoynes. Paul Hoynes missed the Hall of Fame by 8 votes, and there was like 400 people that voted. Thomas Boswell from the Washington Post beat him out by 8 votes. So hopefully they'll put him on the ballot again, just like I think Tom Hamilton was on the ballot like 3 or 4 times before he gets in this year. So, but the point being, so you have Mary Kay winning that Nunn Award. You have Hoynesy nearly making the Hall of Fame,
and he will.
I don't think there's any staff in the country right now that has 2 beat people like that. And then, of course, I really believe Fedor is going to follow in the steps one day of Brian Windhurst, who was a plain dealer basketball writer, and he and I go back to the Beacon Journal. For a while, he was my protege, and now I turn to him periodically for guidance, as I do with Chris on the NBA. And I'm just saying this. It's a strong staff with those 3. Now, others are coming along behind them, but that's really powerful.
We work with some outstanding people. We're really lucky,
Yeah.
Terry. So, but congratulations to Mary Kay, and you're absolutely right, Terry. Poinsy will be in the Hall of Fame. It's just a matter of time, and we'll be pulling for him. So, all right. Well, the Browns, to continue, will have minicamp next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then they'll be riding the train down to summer vacation or whatever they got going and be back for training camp. So, it's happening fast. So, all right. I think we're good on the Browns, right?
That is it.
All right. Oh, I did have one. I was kind of interested in this. I thought it's kind of a football thing. So the Bears have hired Ben Johnson from Detroit as their head coach, and he comes in and he's trying to just change the culture there. And one of the early discussions he had with DJ Moore, their star receiver, was your body language is terrible. I was watching you on film last year, and when there'd be a bad throw or a bad play or something bad happened, your shoulders would slump. It was like you looked like your cat died. And he's like, I don't want to see that anymore. And so DJ Moore, they asked him about it this week, and they said, what did Ben Johnson tell you about your body language? And he said, just don't do it. Just keep it inside. Talk about it later. Don't put it on film. Don't put it on TV. I did it once and we nipped it in the bud and it never happened again. I just said, I ain't never going to do it again.
Good for him.
So, yeah. So it got me
Good
thinking, like, who do you think are the best body language athletes in Cleveland right now? And maybe some of the ones who kind of show it when things go bad. They show that they're upset, and maybe that's not a great thing to let the opponent. What's the old saying from The Godfather, right? Don't ever let anybody outside the family know what you're thinking ever again.
Yeah. Well,
but
he's not there anymore. But Jim Karinchak was terrible. James Karinchak was awful when things got bad.
Oh, right. Yep.
Umpires or fielders or I always watched Karinchak. I guess I missed it when you went to the Hall of Fame. It was kind of like that. The counterpoint, it wasn't so much this past year, but the year before, in the playoffs against Orlando, especially, and a little bit with Boston, when Darius Garland was having a really hard time.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Mm-hmm. And there's Mitchell. I said, Mitchell's the full package. Mitchell's one of the best combinations of stars, leaders, etc. I have ever seen in Cleveland sports. And he was really speaking faith into Garland. And Mitchell, this year, now I thought Darius there. Now Darius was limping around. You could tell he was hurting both mentally and physically in the playoffs. And in fact, there was one point I think in the last game I would have just pulled him. And Darius has some growing up to do. He just does. Doesn't mean he's a bad guy or anything, but he does have some growing up to do. And I was trying to think with the Browns.
I have a Browns one that.
All right. Well, who was flat out awful, just awful.
All right. Well, I had a good one.
Good.
Nick Chubb's body language never, ever, ever changed.
Yes.
I mean, they could be losing by 3 touchdowns or up by 3 touchdowns, and he could have an 80-yard touchdown run, and he never let his body language show if he was fatigued or sore or any of it. And I think he's got to be one of the best Cleveland athletes in terms of body language the last 10 years.
Yeah,
so.
Jim Brown was the same exact way.
Yes.
David, same way. And it was like that spirit of Brown, The only difference was after Brown got hit, he would stay down on the field for like an extra 5 or 8 seconds just
like
to
he
rest.
Was done.
Then he would get up, trudge into there, not bad body, just there, and then, of course, rip off a 20-yard run. That was the only difference. But both of them scored a touchdown, flip the old Jim Brown line, act like you've been there before. Paul Brown said it too, in the end zone after they score. Now, football, OBJ was awful. He was just flat out awful. It was embarrassing how bad he was. I think about, I'll tell you a guy whose body language I thought was really good under horrible circumstances was Tim Couch.
Oh.
This poor guy.
That's a good one.
Getting beat, all that. And just hung in there. And that's really hard in that case. The really good pitchers they had here, I was thinking like Corey Kluber and Bieber. They were just like machines on the mound. They Oral Hershiser, some of my favorites, because it's really hard. You make a good pitch, and then a guy can't turn a double play or whatever. It's you really got to kind of turn around, bite through your lower lip, and pick up the rosin bag, throw it down, and then get the ball.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Terry. I was trying to think of who on the Guardians kind of wears their emotions on their sleeve like that, and I don't think I can think of anybody right off the
Josh
top.
Naylor was the last one.
Yeah.
I mean, he did hit himself in the head with a bat when he wore a helmet.
But these guys are so conditioned to like, hey, whatever happens, we're moving on. Like, just
Yeah,
keep grinding,
it
keep
is.
grinding, it's a very keep grinding mentality in
Yeah,
that clubhouse.
you watch Jose. I mean, the other day, it wasn't that he was mad at something else, but it's like, I think it was last night, he popped up on a pitch, and it's like he kind of squeezed the bat. He's going back to the dugout like he wanted to turn to sawdust. Like, how can I swing at that pitch? Jose. I mean, Jose's like Donovan. Only Jose doesn't do the interviews.
Right.
But the rest of it is just he's out there. He loves being here. He wants to win here. The players know that he's got their back, and we're fortunate in that the two teams that are really good, the two best players on the two teams that are really good are ones that coaches point to and say, do what that guy does. I know that Vogt is very excited to be getting Bieber back because he'll say, just like Terry Francona would say when Kluber was here, do what he does. In fact, Bieber learned to do what he does. Carrasco told me he said he started doing what Bieber did. Well, now, is that because that starting staff's pretty young, and Tanner's is growing, but Bieber will come in and do what Bieber does, and that's important. But by the way, because a lot of it has to do with what you do between starts and everything else.
Absolutely, yeah. Be Bieber.
Be Bieber, yeah. It's just like be Corey.
Yeah. I like that. So I'm going to be watching the Browns this season to see if any of this happens because they're going to lose some games, and quarterback, especially when somebody runs the wrong route, you get pinned with an interception. I'm going to be watching to see what the different body language. I think that can tell you a lot about how a team is functioning and how a guy is coping with the pressure.
I wasn't real high on Shador in the draft or whatever, but one of the things I gave him tremendous credit for, the couple of games that I watched, where it was like Tim Couch. He's taking these terrible beatings in that, and never once, at least body language-wise, did he flinch. Did he seem to be shaken on that? Now, sometimes, as I mentioned, when the rush came, I thought he got happy feet and kind of panicked a little bit. But when he went back to the huddle, when he was on the sidelines, none of that stuff. So that was commendable.
All right. Well, we're going to get into the Guardians when we come back from the break here. Let's take a break real quick. And I did want to remind everybody, we've already read one email. If you have a thought, a question, a comment, a fun sports story or a travel story you want to share on the podcast, send it to sports@cleveland.com and just put Terry's Talkin in the subject line. We've also gotten in some really good emails about Tom Hamilton. Keep sending those, and we're going to start reading those over the next few weeks as we approach his Hall of Fame weekend in July. So we'll take a break here, Terry, right?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. When we come back, we're going to get into the Guardians and more when we return on Terry's Talkin.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
We are back on Terry's Talkin'. Did want to do the weekly commercial for Terry's newsletter. Comes out every Wednesday at noon. Some great stuff in there today. Everything from Wyoming to some cool NFL draft stats. You can sign up by going to cleveland.com/Pluto. Go to the blue bar at the top and you can subscribe. So on to the Guardians, Terry. We were talking about this last week, right? Like the division-leading Detroit Tigers are in Chicago. They have split with the White Sox so far. They have 2 games left against the White Sox, who are struggling mightily again. Guardians have 2 more games. in New York against the Yankees. Right now, the Guardians are 32-27, 6.5 behind Detroit. They're in third place. Yeah, baseball is baseball, right? Anybody can win, but if they don't win one of these games in New York, they could be 8.5 out theoretically coming home, which is a big number for early July. You want to start with last night's game? It was a tough 3-2 loss for the Guardians. What did you think about what you saw last night? I know there was a lot of discussion about Tanner Bybee and keep him in, pull him, what they should have done. We want to talk about that first, maybe?
Okay, first, it's a first guess for me. And after 6 innings, I really thought they were taking him out. In fact, he went to the dugout and he was sitting there. You could tell he was sweating. He looked tired. And I was surprised they rolled him out in the 7th. And at that point, I think he'd allowed only one run. And he gave up 2 homers like within 10 seconds, it seemed. It was really fast. I'm sure within a minute, back-to-back home runs. Now, it was a first guess on my part where I said, oh, he's probably done. And that was not the case. Vogt said there was no indication that he was, and I did go look at it. He did strike out the last 2 hitters. He had a 1-2-3 6th inning and struck out the last 2, but he was these guys don't go much over 100 pitches anymore. He was like 95 pitches. And the one big problem with Tanner is he's been throwing home runs all over the place this year, and he was playing in Yankee Stadium where it's easy to hit home runs. And the bullpen had been rested because they were off the day before. So I figured, here comes the Gaddis, Cade Smith, whatever, Cosse, all those guys were available. But he rolled them out there, and I don't spend a lot of time second guessing managers. I just found it odd.
Yeah, all the signs were pointing to that, and then he finished with 107 pitches, I think.
Yeah, I think he was like at 94 or something of that sort.
Going into the 7th. Yeah.
And it was a tough, that lineup, that's a tough 94 pitches. These guys use all this high leverage stuff and everything else. Well, that was high leverage. And
that whole lineup is pretty much high leverage.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it's just, that bothered me a bit. Also, as I said, the bullpen was rested. We had discussed Cosse going bad earlier. Well, in his last 15 games, he has an ERA of 1.23. I forgot how many saves in a row he has, something like 8. He's got himself back together completely. And by the way, that is very commendable, where you go, a closer falls apart for a while and then pulls it back together. Remember, they rested him for a week, and maybe that's all he needed.
And he's back to what he looked like last year in terms of you're kind of expecting 3-pitch strikeouts from him again, which we haven't said for a while. So it's really something to see. I wanted to ask kind of a general question, Terry. Do you feel like this? So there's help on the way, right? Like Shane Bieber's going to pitch down in Akron on Friday. Yeah. It's his first kind of meaningful baseball where in a game that counts. Means might be coming back this summer. There's going to be some pitching help coming, but you look at the lineup here. I think there's 3 guys batting over 260 right now. And so do you feel like this team's going to have some help on the way and its best baseball is ahead of it? Or do you feel like this is what they're going to be, which is kind of struggling to stay above 500 and struggling to challenge for the division? What are you feeling right now?
Well, if you look at it, this is the first half of the year, other than Quan and, of course, Jose, and now, by the way, Carlos, I put him in that group. These guys are at, all-star or above expected level. Quan and Jose at all-star level. Carlos is, by the way, in the I wrote this down. Yeah, in the month of May, he is hitting 320 in his last 30 games. So that's been a positive. But there's something, I'm a big Manzardo fan. He's driving me nuts, David. He's trying to pull everything. And it's killing him. Last 104 at bats, he's got 3 homers, and he's batting 1 something or other. And they need to just get those tapes of him when that ball's outside. Just hit it to left center. You can Just go back and do that. That's sort of the problem. He came out because he's never been considered a guy that's going to hit 35 home runs. That's not been the scouting report on him. And he had those home runs early, and I think it kind of got into his head the wrong way, and they need to fix that guy. So that's a positive there in terms of what they can do, because this guy's done it before. It's not like when you watch Big Christmas and you see last year you could see he had trouble with sliders outside and breaking pitches, and that was a problem that was going to get worse. And I mean, the Big Christmas thing is so bad right now. I mean, he's 3 for 29. On the year, he's at 146. OPS is 399. I mean, please send him to the minors. Let him play. You could bring back Jonathan Rodriguez if you want, right-handed hitter. I think he's hitting 323. And just to change it up. Him just sitting there playing once or twice a week, that's not going to help him. And it's not going to help Cleveland.
Yeah, they need some change, right? I think they need kind of a jolt of energy, a different dynamic, somebody who can deliver some hits. It's just they're not getting enough from enough guys. And you've been talking about Kafis for a month, and he's still not up. So
he's still there. Now I wrote about this after we did this. They're concerned about his defense, and they're really working with that. But they're doing that. They've got that thing going, I think, in high gear to try to get him ready to come up. Kafis is a left-handed hitter too. They really need another right-handed bat because Nolan Jones will start to come around to pair with him. That's why I mentioned Rodriguez. But they're working on Kafis, but I was told he just has not been very good out there at all.
Yeah, well, he's only played maybe 15 games out in the outfield since they've tried this experiment, right?
Right, they had done it a little bit before. DeLauder, fans that want DeLauder to see hit a double or something. He's only up to 3 or 4 games a week after the hernia surgery and other. He's just not ready to come up. And their view is he just needs to play. Frankly, he needs to show you be healthy for a month or so, and see if they could bring him up. That's why I mentioned Rodriguez. To me, he seems like the logical one. I don't know. I don't have a real strong opinion on Rodriguez. I don't watch him and think, I think he's going to hit. But I know this: Big Christmas ain't going to hit. He's a mess.
Yeah. I mean, like I think you said. I looked up Rodriguez's numbers. I think he's batting 318, 856 OPS. Like that's you get 2/3 of that. You're still ahead of where you're at.
Something right.
Yeah.
I mean, the Columbus numbers have always been inflated. I mean, you saw how bad Brian Rocchio was, right, when he was here. He goes down there, and he's played 19 games. He's got 5 homers and 20 RBIs. He's hitting 276, 933 OPS. Now, maybe things have come together for him or whatever, but you always kind of watch those Columbus numbers. Nonetheless, Kafis is kind of hit everywhere, and he'll probably hit it. Just like I know DeLauder. I wrote this huge thing on DeLauder when he was at Lake County. I went out there and just fell in baseball love with him. But that was a couple injuries ago. But I really think if DeLauder stays healthy, he'll hit. But he's got to, basically you got to get one guy healthy and you got to teach the other guy to play the outfield.
Yeah, it's taking time. So
yeah,
I know a lot of Guardians fans have been clamoring about the catching situation and lack of offensive production for the last few years, but I did want to pass along some happy news for them. Cooper Ingle, playing for the Rubber Ducks. I think he's 23, but he had a 4-hit night last night, and he's batting 298 right now. I think with a 919 OPS.
Yeah.
So we might see him move up to Columbus sometime this summer.
I saw him in Class A. I can't remember. I think this was last year, and I really liked him. And he was, I think he played at Clemson or somewhere like that. And he's a pretty good catcher. He's a guy that can hit. So he could come quick. And Bo Naylor looks. He just looks lost at the plate. So we'll see. But the Kobe Huff, I think, is catching a lot of AAA, and he's good defensively. I don't know if he'll hit, but that's where I have to admit. I mean, I don't want my catcher to be an automatic out, but I'm not obsessed with like some fans. Like the catcher's got to hit. I mean, I think the average catcher in the big leagues hits like 224 or something, and most of them, you just want them to really do a good job. I want balls blocked in the dirt. Remember a couple of years ago, who did they sign? He used to be with Seattle. He's a veteran catcher they brought in here, and he was terrible. He was beyond. He couldn't block balls in the dirt or anything.
How
It's when
quickly
they
we
let,
forget.
yeah, and
He wasn't around for 3 months.
yeah, it was, and they paid him like $6 million or something.
Yeah,
and he it just showed you how bad, because he came in after Hedges and Roberto Perez, and that was when they kind of switched over from the catchers, and it was a bad move. And I will say this: I think Bo keeps getting better defensively, and he's throwing well. But I mean, he has shown an ability to hit some home runs and doubles and things in the minors, and once in a while he's a ball of the park, but he's struggling.
All right, part of your newsletter today, Terry, I think you were writing about why Jose Ramirez is the best Cleveland player that you've seen live and in person.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about that for a minute? I thought we should see listeners should send us in like who they think is the best they've seen in person, right? I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, right. This is, and I'm talking about all-around players. Of course, Albert. You could argue whether Albert Bell or Manny Ramirez is the best hitter. Would be, or throw Tommy in too if you want. Manny was probably the best pure hitter I've ever seen in Cleveland. I didn't see Tris Speaker or Lou Boudreau, but those two guys there. But when you add into Jose's one of 14 guys or something in Major League history with 250 homers and 250 steals, and
the only third baseman.
Yeah, and at the age of 32, he's still going. I mean, right now he's 4 years into that new contract they gave him in 22, and he's this is probably the best start he's ever been off to, and he's above average at third. He's a terrific base runner, not just stealing bases, but running the bases. He's just, I think he's going to be a 7th All-Star season. I'll just ask, who's better? Better all-around player in Cleveland that you've watched?
Yeah, let us know. Send that to sports@cleveland.com and an email, and we will try and get some of those on next week.
The nice thing is they have some good players here. Of course, Kenny Lofton was faster, and Omar Vizquel was above all, at least in my mind, at shortstop. But when you add in everything like Jose, it's pretty remarkable.
And he plays every day. Brings it every day. So, all right. Well, the Guardians are in New York, as we talked about, wrapping up that series. And then Friday, they return to Progressive Field to take on the Houston Astros in a weekend series. And then they have the Reds at home Monday through Wednesday next week. And then they are on a 9-game swing out west to Seattle, San Francisco, and this is weird to say, Sacramento to play the Athletics. Yeah. So that'll be a long trip and might go a long way to determining how they're going to be in the division this year in terms of challenging or not challenging. So, all right, some Cavs, Terry. You wrote about what Cavs fans can learn from the NBA Finals, and I think there's a lot of Cavs fans who are kind of living vicariously, or I don't know what the right word is, through the Indiana Pacers, because they want to see how this is going to turn out. But how do you think Cavs fans should feel about this matchup we have?
I think some of us are still programmed to like when LeBron and Steph Curry were playing each other all the time in the finals. I mean, there's a stretch from the year of 2007, the first time LeBron went to the finals in Cleveland, to 2020 when he won the title with the Lakers. That's a 14-year span in which a LeBron James team, and he took 3 different teams to the NBA Finals, 10 out of 14 years. So and then Steph Curry, they went 5 straight years, and I think another year they won. So he's been to at least 6 of them. But all that ended like in 21 or 22, something like that. But anyway, what I looked at was the last 6 years of NBA playoffs, finals, teams in the finals. So that means you're talking about 12 matchups. 10 different teams have been in the finals out of those 12 matchups. And if you turn around and then look at The two repeaters are Miami and Boston. That's it. So that tells you, and it should tell me that, all right, they didn't make it, but it's not like there's a super team that has slammed the door shut on Cleveland. I wanted to know who was predicting a year ago at this time that we would see OKC and Indiana in the finals.
Nobody
that
I saw.
Yeah, I mean, that's, so you look at that, teams are having trouble repeating, they're having trouble even getting back there.
And unlike baseball, like there are teams in baseball that I don't think can ever win a championship. I think it's gotten better in the NBA. Like I don't know that the Sacramento Kings could ever win an NBA, or OKC, or any of these teams where, everybody wanted to play for the Knicks or the Lakers or the Celtics at one point, and they would just flock there. Except for the LeBron years in Cleveland. But this with the second apron that you've been writing about, and Chris Fedor and Ethan Sands, our Cavs reporters, have been writing about, it makes it very tough for teams that are with high salaries to do much with their roster, and that has opened the door for these younger middle market teams to just step in and make it to the finals. It's really been something.
I was texting with a prominent NBA coach who's a friend of mine, and he wrote back. He said, "Well, the NBA wanted parity, and they got it."
Yeah.
And the NBA wanted to give all its market-sized teams a shot at it, and they got it. I mean, I have it in my story today. I think Indiana's like the 25th media market or something, and Oklahoma City's like 46. I mean, this would not
47,
happen.
I had it right here.
The reason that happens is because the NBA, this would fix a lot of baseball. If they had the NBA maximum contract rules, where most of these max contracts are 4 or 5 years and that's it, they're worth a lot of money, but it's not 13 years or 10 years. Because if you're in a middle market baseball thing, you think, all right, I'm going to go, 5 years and $200 million for this guy. And I'm thinking, no, in the back of my mind, if he's a star, if it doesn't work out and we're in bad within 2 or 3 years, I can still trade him. He only has 2 years left. So they're more likely to go in on that. And that has really helped the NBA, is the way the maximum contract situation limits, there's a maximum amount of money, but more importantly, limits the years.
Yeah, and baseball is just still the wild, wild west in terms of pay everybody what you want, and everybody just deal with it. So I don't know that we're ever going to see that, but it would be a cool thing to try for the competitive nature.
It's an obvious fix. It just is.
Well, not for the Players Association.
Well, I mean the Players Association. If you were, though, David, to offer them, as they would say, more for the working class players, as opposed to the 5 or less % of the players who would ever qualify for a maximum contract, you might have a chance of making this, for example, the first 3 years of your major league career before you're not even eligible for arbitration. You're almost working on what amounts to a minimum contract your first 3 years. And then the next 3 years for arbitration. If they were to go into that somehow and, maybe make those first 3 years, you set it's like, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, something like that, as opposed to these other things. I think you might be able to get a trade-off there on the high end, because that
would flatten the salary structure across the league.
That would impact far more players than Juan Soto or these other guys, when Dor came up or whatnot. So it's an interesting thought.
It would be cool to see what that looked like, no doubt. So, all right. Again, I feel like Cavs fans are kind of living through other teams a little bit this year, but the New York Knicks fired Thibodeau this week, and if you're a Cavs fan, you immediately thought back to last year when J.B. Bickerstaff was let go and Kenny Atkinson was brought in. But the Knicks really apparently feel like they need to make a change at head coach to get this thing to the next level. So what was your take on that? I didn't want to mention Ethan Sands has a really interesting take on that today, basically, where he says if you're going to be living in the NBA of a decade ago and you're not going to be forward thinking about the way the game is played now, you're not going to last long. But what did you think about that?
I mean, I thought Ethan raised some interesting points. I did read it. But to act like Tom Thibodeau goes back to the days of the center jump with George Mikan is a bit much, I mean, yeah, he may be living in the past, but this is the first time in 25 years the Knicks have made the conference finals. It's the first time since the 90s that they've had back-to-back games of winning seasons of 50 wins or more. And he had been there 5 years and went to the playoffs 4 times. I mean, I'm sure Tibbs is sitting there going, well, okay, maybe I play my starters too much or whatever, but exactly what did I do wrong? But I also think that sometimes what teams do, and we'll see if, for example, how it works out in Cleveland, the old going from good to great. And the temptation is, okay, this coach has got us to good. Can the next coach get us to great? That's because clearly J.V. Bickerstaff's a really good coach. I mean, to Detroit, and they hadn't had a winning season in 8 years, and bang, you got them into the playoffs, and they had a winning season, and they played defense. You want to say that's Stone Age basketball, fine, but it's winning basketball. And the problem always is when you fire somebody, who do you have in mind? At least when the Cavs fired JB, they had Kenny in mind. They liked what he did in Brooklyn. They thought his style of offense, his style of leadership would work. It wasn't like they were hiring a guy who had never been a head coach before. Where you fire Thibodeau and say they hire whether it's Johnny Bryant or somebody else, Bryant is a Cavs assistant, who's not been a head coach before, and you drop this guy into the New York market, I may add, where there's a lot more attention, that's a tough assignment. And then you're taking over a team that basically you're firing that coach. You're saying, you know what? You better go to the finals.
Yeah, it's a tough place to win.
Yeah,
I never understood why New York is the mecca of basketball either, but that's a discussion for another day. They've won a championship forever.
It goes back to the 50s and 60s when they played a lot of
colleges all played there.
Colleges game, yes. When the NIT was National Invitation, was as big as the NCAA tournament because it was at Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden also was the hub of some of the biggest gambling scandals back in the 50s. Like I forgot what it was, NYU or City College in New York. Point shaving, yeah. Because when I did the book, Tall Tales of the NBA of the 50s and 60s, it's done the same oral history style as Loose Balls. And the guys that talk about is probably like now everybody's yelling out point shaving and or pointing at point differentials, that kind of stuff on the bets that were being made back in the court or before the game or at halftime with the different bookies. But that's really where it comes from.
All right, Terry, we can talk about Darius Garland here. We got a few emails, or we have a trade proposal from a listener. I'd like to do one and save the other so we can spend some time on both of these. Which one do you want to do?
Let's trade.
Okay. So I appreciate all the emails that our listeners have sent in on Darius Garland. I've got them all saved, and we will get to them next week, our next podcast, not next week. All right, so this is from Jim Slama. I hope I got your name right, Jim. And he says, hi, Terry, I love your column from Chicago. Go Cavs. Here's my proposed trade to float after the NBA Finals. Jarrett Allen and Darius Garland plus $5 million for Giannis Antetokounmpo and Pat Connaughton from the Bucks. What do you think? So I did feed this into the trade machine, and it works. Like I think even without the $5 million, I guess they might throw that in to sweeten the deal or whatever for one side or the other. But the trade apparently works in the trade machine, and now we can look at the merits of it in terms of basketball.
I think it works. What do you think? First of all, I think it works before July 1st because I think then the Cavs hit the second apron. For example, when you're in the second apron, you cannot add money into a deal. Generally, it almost requires you to trade one player for one player. You can't put aggregate contracts together. I'm not going to get all of it, but that's why the second apron thing is a problem. And I think the Cavs would have until July 1st to do that. I'll simply ask you this. If you're Milwaukee, would you do it?
I would.
Really?
Yeah, because I think Darius Garland, he's got a long career ahead of him, and I think he could be a really good player for them. And Jarrett Allen, we know what we got in him, and I kind of put some stock in the youth of both of these guys, and Giannis is getting up there. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, supposedly they want a bunch of draft picks because everybody right now has set the standard of 3 first round draft picks when you trade a star. That was in the Donovan Mitchell trade. That was in the Rudy Gobert trade. And I'm sure I'm probably missing something else. And the Cavs, they don't have any. I mean, unless you want to trade your 2040 picks or something, I mean, you got nothing left to trade for that. So I don't think they would do it. It's interesting. It's not a stupid trade in any way. That kind of thing. So
And Connaughton, he had a bunch
shoot.
of injuries last year. I think he had a calf and a adductor, and he missed half the season. So, I mean, it's basically Giannis for the two guys is what you're boiling it down to.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah. It's a lot better than some of the others I've seen, but I don't know if I had Giannis, I'm running an auction. I'm not doing it the Dallas Mavericks way of I'm only talking to the Lakers.
Yeah, backroom deal with one team.
When you have Luka, it's like the guy from Dallas should have been fired on the spot for that. I mean, just crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Luka or you got Giannis. You let everybody know. We're just taking calls and see what you can get. Basically, Utah did that. They put word out all over the NBA. We're trading Rudy Gobert. We're trading Donovan Mitchell. We got 2 phones here. We got text. We got email. We got whatever you want. Send it in.
Go. Yeah. What do you got?
And they got 7 draft. Now, it hasn't worked out well for Utah so far, but in terms of assets, they got a ton. And all right, with Donovan Mitchell, remember the Cavs traded 3 first rounders. They also traded Lauri Markkanen, who's become an all-star there. They traded Sexton, who's become a valuable player off the bench. They traded the kid from Kansas. They drafted Asaki or something like that.
Agbaji, yeah.
Agbaji,
yep.
Who didn't play very well there, but actually I think he's with Toronto. He's starting to come around a little bit. So basically, he was a first-round pick who never actually played for the Cavs, plus 3 first-rounders, plus those other guys. And that was the price for Donovan Mitchell. And the price for Giannis should be more. Now you could argue, Jared has made 1 All-Star team, and Donovan and Darius has made a couple. But I don't know. It's kind of fun to talk about. Be interested to see what type of offers they get. I mean, maybe
I don't know.
Maybe the Knicks are going to. Maybe the Knicks are going to trade everybody for him. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I do think you're right though, Terry. I think the Cavs are where their heads are where they said they were at the end of season press conferences. Like we gave it one shot. We're going to stick with it. So
the thing I've heard is they want to give Darius on the kind of off-season program that a younger Steph Curry was on to build up his endurance, build up his strength, all that kind of stuff. Not to say he'll become Curry, but Curry was a guy, although I was really looking, other than 1 year in his first 5 where he had, I forgot what up with injury, missed quite a few games, he was playing like 78 games. He was playing, but they wanted him to get stronger. So that's one of their off-season plans. Now, of course, things can change. But keep in mind that July 1st thing. Now, I'm going to continue to check on that to make sure that they are indeed going to probably go on the second apron thing on July 1st, which messes up like a deal we just talked about there.
Right.
But we'll see.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Terry, I just want real quick that I think 2031 is the first rounder that the Cavs would be able to trade because you're at 25, 27, and 29 all went to Utah.
Yeah, so you can't if you're Milwaukee, you can't do that. You got to get more, and you also have to figure out from Milwaukee what are you trying to do? Are you trying to win or whatever? I mean, what they're trying to do all the time is fire coaches. I mean, they're good at that.
All right. Well, thanks for that, getting us off on that little trade tangent there. Appreciate the email.
I never would have imagined a trade like that. So credit to that, because I could be very dismissive on trades. Well, that's just dumb. Not that at all on this.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Jim, checking in from Chicago, and we appreciate kind of the creativity you brought there. So, all right. I think we're heading down the home stretch here, Terry. We do have one email about your Wyoming vacation, and I wanted to thank you again for that. You got me a Wyoming Cowboys hat that I received in the mail. And I love it. I'm wearing it right now. So, but this comes from John Yost, and he says, "Hey Terry, thanks for sharing your Wyoming vacation photos. A popular fiction writer whose books take place in Wyoming is C.J. Box. I recommend that you look into him as an author if you're not aware of his work. His books are engaging, quick reads, and my favorite part, he makes the Wyoming landscape a central character in his books. He provides vivid descriptions of the landscape and wildlife." And again, that's from John Yost. So you've heard of C.J. Box and you're well familiar with him, aren't
Yes,
you?
I've basically read everything he's written, just about.
Not surprised.
And the cool thing about Box is, like James Lee Burke is another mystery writer. He writes primarily novels set in Louisiana. Michael Connelly is another guy I like. He writes mysteries set primarily in LA. And in each case, they make the landscape, or wherever they are, the city, a character almost there. Box is a fascinating guy because he started writing for the Saratoga paper, not Saratoga, New York, Saratoga, Wyoming, I think population 4,000, a weekly paper. And then he also needed extra money, so he got hooked up with the Wyoming Tourism, and he wrote all this stuff for the Wyoming Tourism Bureau, traveling all over Wyoming. In the process, he got to know game wardens and became very fascinated by Wyoming game wardens who were, sometimes going into the deep wilderness to find these guys who are poaching moose and elk and everything, and running into some very rough characters that were living back in there. And so he created this novel with the main character being a game warden who has all these adventures, and some of it's kind of unrealistic, but it's a really good yarn. He is easy to read. The language could be a little rough, and there's violence, but Roberta likes the stories too. And I suggest you check him out. He's also written some with a couple other characters he's created. But the cool thing is, so I went into a couple bookstores and I saw they had Box's books, and I'm like, now, by the way, he's been a #1 bestseller, New York Times, I think 5 times, and something like 20 sometimes on the bestseller list. He's had some Netflix things, and the guy's worth, I don't know, 50 million, 100 million, big time. So I said, hey, I see you got C.J. Box here. I said, do you know him? Oh, yeah. Every time he has a book, he has a signing. This is a little store in Laramie and another one in Cheyenne. And, I mean, he still lives out there and he covers the home front. And I thought that was so cool. It's exactly kind of like how he comes across when I've seen him interviewed. And it's worth checking out.
Yeah, it's nice that he's not like big timing as the Wyoming people by just going to New York and doing the bookstore signing at
I'm sure he does
Barnes
some
and
of
Noble,
those
right?
too, but it's like, no, that's by the way, his character is a great line. He said, like the game warden will show up somewhere, and a guy will be there kind of hiding something or whatever, and the game warden will see it, and he goes, "Well, guess you know I'm here." And the guy get all nervous. Yeah, I was afraid of that. Well, here I am. And he goes, the next thing you know, this guy's like, I shouldn't have shot that elk that's hanging back over there. I know it was on his season. And it was a great line. The other line that he has all the time when things get a little rough and there's a fight, he goes, well, we're going to get a little Western here. So
it's funny though.
You should do that, David, when you're not unhappy with somebody on the staff. You just say, well, I bet you know why I called.
I bet you know why I'm here, why I called, yeah. You were mentioning though, like his background was in journalism, and it's like they always say the best fiction is real life, right? And
right.
Like David Simon, who wrote The Wire, that hugely and critically well received series back 10 or whatever years ago, like he used to cover police and crime in Baltimore, like that, for the Baltimore Sun, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think you take a lot of that real life experience you have covering different things and the crazy stories and the interesting characters you meet, and you can spin some really interesting fiction out of it. So that seems like that's what C.J. Box did.
Michael Connelly was credit. Who wrote the Harry Bosch series and all that. He's had a lot of bestsellers. Connelly was originally a crime writer, covering the crime, by the way, for the Fort Lauderdale paper, and then went to the LA Times and had the police beat in that. And then out of that, he started to take notes and create this detective and everything else. That sounds easy, but as somebody who's been in journalism, and I wrote about this in a newsletter recently where I talked about how I had a couple plays get stage reading, and I tried to sell some novels and couldn't do it. I found it to be very hard. Plotting and that kind of thing I could kind of do sort of characters and atmosphere, but creating the plotting and that's not easy. So
yeah, what's the saying? If it was easy, everybody would do it, right?
Yeah, I've had these people say, well, if I had as much time as like John Grisham, I could do stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, give me a break. Oh, I get it. Grisham's got 48 hours in the day, and you only have 24. No, Grisham, when he was working as a small-time lawyer, was getting up at 5 a.m. to write his first couple novels before he really hit big. CJ Box is like driving around Oklahoma, interviewing, guys that, their new restaurant in Cheyenne for that, in between writing, about his game warden idea.
All right, well, check out CJ Box, and Terry's always got some great book recommendations, and there's a good one from an email that we received off of your Wyoming trip. Thanks for that email, John Yost. All right, I think we're good here, Terry, right?
That is it.
All right, I do want to remind people, Tom Hamilton's Hall of Fame weekend in Cooperstown is coming up July 25th, 26th, 27th, and we have gotten in some great stories, memories, things you want to tell us about your feelings about Tom Hamilton as he prepares to go in the Hall of Fame. Send those to us at sports@cleveland.com. Put Terry's Talkin in the subject line, and we will try to start reading those. We are going to be off next week. We'll be back the following week, so be sure to join us then, and we'll see you then on Terry's Talkin.